Everybody, welcome to today's Agile Friday. I'm Justin Burns from the Office of the CIO. I'll be your host today. Joining us today is Jeanne Isola from the University of Washington. She'll be talking to us about Lean Agile Basics and Essentials. This will be a 1-hour event with 30 minutes presentation from Jeanne, followed by 30 minutes Q&A. You can use the chat window in WebEx to send questions at any time. Send them privately to me, and I can forward them on to Jeanne after the presentation. Please submit questions privately rather than in public chat. Agile Fridays are a collaboration between the Office of the CIO and Results Washington. To find out more and keep up to date, you can visit us at http://ocio.wa.gov/agile-fridays. A big thanks to Jeanne and the University of Washington for helping us out today. With that said, I will turn over control of the presentation to Jeanne. Marie.
Thank you, Justin. So today we're going to be talking about Lean Agile Basics and Essentials, and this is the first of two Agile Friday presentations we're going to do. The second one is on May 16th, and we're going to talk about how we actually applied these basics and scaled this methodology to the finance program within the University of Washington. To get started, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are with me today. First, I am the director of the finance program with the University of Washington's Information Technology Division, and my role in this has been to be the sponsor and the driver, and also to provide the vision. I'm joined with our consultant, Alan Chadalawada, who is the president of Net Objectives, and Alan really was the key trainer who really helped ground us in the methodology and then provided ongoing coaching and influence. I'd also like to introduce Gwen Trentham, who's a project manager currently with our HR payroll improvement project, but at the time she was with the finance program, and also Maureen Noonan, who's the organizational development specialist in UWIT. And Gwen and Maureen both played coaching roles. So they were actually providing direct coaching to our groups within the finance program on how to implement these basic Lean Agile methodologies. Gwen is going to be joining me in this presentation, and I will take you all through the first half, and then she'll take over from there. So I'd like to just start with the goal and benefit of agility. The concept of agility is really to provide the highest business value in the shortest amount of time, predictably. And the predictably is really important because if you're developing software, your end user or business partner needs to know when they're going to receive that value, and they need to know that they're going to receive it on a regular basis. This next slide is really illustrating a key area of waste in the development of software. The Standards Group does a regular study of about 2,000 projects across 100 companies, and what they're finding is that the functionality in software, what you experience is 45% of the functionality that's actually built in is never used. And the delay that is occurring is the delay of your developers building that software that nobody ever uses. So the concept of Lean Agile is really to take Lean principles and eliminate that waste, building software you don't need. And the point is that you are only building the things that the customer wants and believes is necessary. The key thinking is that we're not going to attack 100% of the project. We're only going to attack 7% that's always wanted. And that's what you're seeing on this slide, is that 7% of the features that are built into software are used always. And once we've done that, we'll come back and ask the business, what's next? What's most important to have you build next? And so you have this iterative process where you are ensuring that what you are building is of the highest business value, and that you literally do not build the software that you're seeing in this slide that is never used. And what you get for this is you get the opportunity to eliminate some pretty significant problems. You don't build more than's needed. You eliminate building lower priority items. You build the right thing instead of the wrong thing. You don't have poor quality software because you're regularly checking in with your customer to make sure that it's meeting their needs. And you have the right resources working on it, and you're not in the position of discovering your functional needs late in the process. So Lean Agile is really helping you eliminate or minimize those risks. So agility. The focus really is on value, and it's on applying lean principles and agile practices so that we can produce business value. And in order to achieve that, the business value really has to be in the center. And all of the people that are involved in the project are contributing to making and realizing that business value. So that includes your business partners, management, and then your team. And while your team is focused on delivering a technical product, your team has to include subject matter experts, business product owners, and key stakeholders who are going to be utilizing that software. And with the focus on business value, you're continually prioritizing and ensuring that the work is of the highest value and that you're making progress quickly. So you're keeping that flow going. And what you're really looking at is this value stream, so that when you start and you have your requirements, those are really coming in as input, but they're being actively prioritized, planned, and staged by the business so that when the technical team is ready to build, those requirements of the highest value are ready to pull. And then the team takes on an iterative agile approach where they're developing the software, bringing it back to the business and saying, is this right? And then they're making changes and coming back again and saying, is this right? So that the ultimate outcome is of the highest business value and meets the business needs. And that altogether is creating that lean agile value stream, where Agile is providing the framework and practices for producing the increments of functionality, and Lean is providing the principles and practices which are enabling and defining the prioritization of those increments. So Lean thinking is really only working on something that has business value and you know how to achieve it. And I think also important is only starting something that you know you can finish, and that really gets back to the increments that you're working on. And so having a quick discovery process allows you to do those things. And it puts you in the position of being able to pull work and work quickly and move things through the process where you can deliver value on a regular basis. One way to think about this is a freeway. You all probably pretty familiar with the picture you see. And in this picture, you have a lot of people trying to go in the same direction at the same time. And none of them are getting there very fast. But the road is being highly utilized. In contrast, the picture on your right is showing you vehicles that are moving very quickly and getting to wherever they're trying to go very quickly. And that's because there's not so many things going on the freeway. They're able to move quickly. So the focus there is on throughput, and the focus is on the speed of moving those cars through to get to their destination. If you use that metaphor with software, you're really focusing on the speed of producing value, in contrast to the picture on the left, where you're not utilizing the individual person's capacity. So on one hand, you've got high utilization, but you're not making much progress. On the other hand, you don't have high utilization, but you're moving people through quickly to their destinations. And that's really the goal of our Agile Lean methodology. You want to stop starting things so that you have lots of work in process, but you aren't completing anything that has business value. And instead, you want to start moving work through the build and finishing it quickly on a predictable cycle. Key principles really are to optimize the whole and eliminate waste, build in quality, and deliver fast. and you're deferring commitment on things that you know are going to have to come through, but you're just not ready to tackle them yet. And you're relying on your business product owners to help you prioritize what those things are. This really helps to empower people and to continually improve on the process and help to create knowledge across the team. But a key concept that has to be kept front and center at all times is that you can't build the right thing if you don't know what it is. And so here is where you really are relying on your business partners to help you understand what the return on investment is, how to prioritize and sequence the work, creating those business value increments, and then developing a method to have acceptance criteria where the business can validate that you're building what they want you to build. So you have to realize it, what it is you want to do. You have to discover what the next increment is and then build it. And that's what really is creating that business value. So I'm going to hand it off to Gwen Trentham now, who's going to be talking about roles, boundaries, and scaling. And she's also going to give you some more of the basics of applying the Lean Agile methodology.
Great. Thank you, Jean Marie. So, this next part of the presentation will really discuss how to stay focused on the business value during your implementation. The Agile Lean methodology emphasizes the importance of collaboration between business and IT. Business defines the goals for the solutions, and their goals may be things such as increase efficiencies, reduce compliance risk, things that will achieve the organizational mission of that unit and maintain their viability. IT then works with the business to determine what outcomes will ensure these business results are realized. IT works with business to define what capabilities, what workflows are needed to support those business goals. Once that's been agreed upon, the business capabilities and workflows process maps are delivered to the team to start their execution. The IT team then uses the process to implement solutions using an iterative 2 or 4 week cycle to process through the prioritized features, again working with business to determine that priority, and reviewing the acceptance criteria. So as the work gets broken down, defining the acceptance criteria and getting the sign-off on business to ensure that that is achieving the business value that they need. So the complexity of different environments require different levels of agility and frameworks to be established. Typical projects on the lower level there work really well with the most common Agile process. It works well when you have a single dedicated stakeholder. The project is within one hub, and it's well-defined and pretty well isolated. So that is where your basic Agile principles work. When you start adding complexity to the work that needs to be accomplished, there's more that needs to be done to set up a larger framework and to do that scaling. Medium complexity is defined by a program that has multiple teams that are impacted by the work being delivered. There's multiple stakeholders that need to be managed and coordinated and really working on a single vision of what they want to accomplish. Business requirements may not be well defined up front. They may be discovered and emerge as you work through the process. And you may need to do enterprise releases, so coordinating across multiple teams to do that release. The high complexity comes in when you have multiple programs within that also then have multiple teams. You may be working with new technology and need to discover how that works best. The external dependencies may come in. You may have vendors you need to work with. And then you have multiple stakeholders that have competing priorities. So as you scale Agile across these different complexities, there's more work and more framework that needs to be put in place. There's also multiple levels of hierarchy that need to be involved in establishing a lean Agile process. Again, the foundation begins at the team level with roles such as Scrum Masters and Product Owners and Developers. The next level up, you have product owners and technology delivery managers who may be coordinating work across multiple teams or multiple work streams, and they need to set realistic priorities together. At the top executive level are your sponsors and key stakeholders that you need to have their support to ensure success and evaluate that you're achieving the business value that they support. So the team that implements the solution is also known as a pod and has these characteristics. It's cross-functional. It needs to include all the skill sets needed to deliver value. So this may include business analysts who are defining those requirements, developers who are building the solutions, testers. It may also include customer support or training staff who are developing the training as the product is being developed. Every skill set that is needed to realize the value should be part of the team. It is important to advocate for consistency at the team level when you're scaling across multiple teams. The consistency enables agility when managing deliverables where multiple teams are required. Priorities may shift as you learn and discover things about what you're delivering, and you may need to form different teams, and so having some level of consistency makes that process work easier and allows you to be more agile. So really the key, another key of realizing business value and staying focused on those high priority features and not delving into the waste and the never or rarely used features is working in increments and being focused, again, on the business value. Thinking about what can be accomplished in smaller pieces. So this chart shows 4 different methodologies that have been used to deliver software or deliver value. We have the ideal, the minimum build release, the waterfall, and the blend. Up in the top left, the ideal shows initial business value is delivered pretty quickly, and then work is just continuing to fine-tune it. And so you could consider that delving into the rarely used features. You know, how much business value are you actually getting for the work that you're doing? The next one is a minimum build-out where an initial set of features are delivered, but the value for that is not necessarily the highest, and so it takes a little bit more time to achieve maximum business value. The typical waterfall that I think most of us are used to and familiar with takes a long time to realize any value. It's working through all of those requirements and development and getting to the end before anything is delivered and realized. A way to blend and bring in the best of those different strategies is to incrementally deliver value over a consistent cadence, and so that's really what the blend approach is showing. Each effort and time increment is spent on achieving value, so you're making good progress in delivering that value. Terms that are used to define increments are business value chunks and minimum business increments. So your business product owners, technology delivery managers, those people in the middle level of the triangle I showed earlier are going to be working on defining your chunks. Those are less defined and more higher level. Those chunks can then be broken down into minimum business increments and are comprised of different business capabilities, those things that are dependent on each other to deliver a business value. So you're really looking for your smallest set or collection of features that you can deliver to a customer, and you can realize that value in either reducing compliance risk or achieving some efficiencies. The business value chunks and minimum business increments can then be broken down further into features and user stories. This chart really shows a hierarchy and traceability that can be accomplished between the business value chunks and the individual tasks. Using this traceability and maintaining this context and focus on business value ensures that you're not delving into that area of waste, and that you're always focused on the highest priority, and that you're only breaking down the work so that you can achieve the value of the component above it. So I just spoke about the chunks and MBIs. Then you have features and user stories. So user stories are where you can get into the more detailed acceptance criteria and have your business product owners sign off and review that. Those user stories can be broken down into right-size stories. So stories that can fit into your increments, whether you're doing 2 or 4 week sprints. Those right-size stories are really intended to be accomplished in that period of time. So applying lean thinking throughout each of these levels as you are breaking down the work, and ensuring that as you break it down, it's going to be only specific to achieve the goal above it, will eliminate waste in the process. And it's also a way to minimize your work in process. This chart it's very detailed, but it is called a book of work and lists all of the minimum business increments that have been prioritized across the program or hub. So this is multiple teams, multiple work streams that are represented by the different colors in that column A. Then also listed on here are the corresponding product owners responsible for ensuring the highest priority minimum business increment is getting worked on, and then they are getting involved in the sign-offs and reviews. This chart provides transparency into achieving in terms of what work is active, what work is on deck. It should be reviewed frequently to ensure teams are working on the highest value work and that the next work coming up, again, is the highest next priority for the business. So now I'm going to discuss some of the basics for Agile Lean. So thinking back to earlier slides, the business owns the decisions around scope, value, and the time that is acceptable to achieve results. So thinking about that project triangle, the scope, schedule, and budget, the business really owns decisions that may be needed to adjust that based on what is discovered. An essential element to ensuring delivery in a predictable way is making sure that there's a cadence on the team that's doing the value delivery. So you want to execute in an evenly paced way so that you can reduce your work in process and maximize your throughput. Common routines that help contribute to a consistent cadence are establishing a routine release cycle. So a common time length for release is quarterly. Again, you've heard me mention a couple times is your sprints or your iteration length. Having 2 to 4 week sprints and doing that predictable each time will help ensure you have enough time to do focused work, but then be able to stop and adjust your priorities as they shift in the organization. Another good practice that helps ensure that cadence is a daily scrum. So a daily team meeting is intended to be a quick touch point for the team that's doing the work and executing on it and working in that iteration. Have that meeting at the same time, same place every day. It helps just reinforce that cadence. During the sprint process, there are 4 meetings to help keep the framework in place. These meetings or ceremonies reinforce the cadence. They are the daily stand-up, which I've already mentioned, a sprint planning meeting or iteration planning meeting that happens at the beginning where the team is breaking down those user stories and features into right-sized stories that will fit into the iteration and are committing to that work and putting it in the sprint backlog. During the iteration, those daily stand-ups are occurring. At the end, the team then has deliverables that it's sharing with the customer and does that with a demo. The team then, before going into iteration planning, will have a retrospective, review the process and delivery that they just went through and identify any ways that they can make adjustments and improve the efficiency of the team. This is another view of the Agile sprint process. It shows that the product backlog at the front of the process, again, that has a collection of user stories in it, which have been broken down from the features and then broken down from the MBIs or minimum business increments. This product backlog is then translated into the sprint backlog, so the team does further work breakdown on those user stories and develops a sprint backlog of right-sized stories. Those stories are accepted by the team into the sprint. Those may be, or the iteration, those may be 2 to 4 weeks in length. And then while you're working in that increment, you're doing a daily stand-up. And then deliverables are developed during that iteration and accomplished at the end, and that is then what's shared with your customer during the demo. Again, you've heard me talk about the product backlog, but it's the list of all the work necessary to accomplish the minimum business increment. And it can be something that's broken down and defined before you get into your sprints as you're working on your MBI. It's something that you could do, for example, in a sprint 0, break down all of your features into user stories and load up your product backlog and start iterating on them. The product backlog should be reviewed each sprint to ensure, again, that you're maintaining focus on that minimum business value. This is another way, continuing those reviews to eliminate waste, make sure the scope is not expanding beyond what is minimally necessary to deliver value. And another important value of reviewing the product backlog is you will make discoveries as you're doing the development, and you may want to adjust the future stories based on what you have learned. And when the customer is reviewing the deliverables, they can start providing feedback into what they actually need. This chart is an example of a way to measure progress towards a release in realizing that business value. The chart uses the team's velocity and estimates of planned work to predict when the milestones and releases will happen. So the milestones are the triangles on the chart. And then the line across the top is where the team will be once all story points related to all user stories and all work needed to achieve the program level goals will be done. Story points are used instead of hours to measure the team's velocity and predict the releases. It's a way of extracting and expanding the way effort is measured. As work is completed each sprint, this chart is updated based on the actuals. It can be used to make adjustments. Again, looking at your trends, do you need to add more resources? Do you need to increase your velocity, or do you want to adjust your scope? You can make decisions and adjustments based on the trends that you find in this chart. Finally, a review of the artifacts. Some of these I've gone back over and shared here. To summarize, the key benefit of the Agile Lean framework is visibility into the work that the team is doing and providing a way to track and measure progress and make adjustments. These artifacts are the product backlog, the iteration or sprint backlog, top line charts, and release burn-up charts. So we're at the end of the presentation and now open for questions. I don't know who.
Marie, thank you. Oh, sorry, I was just going to follow up there. Jeanne Marie, thank you very much for presenting, and everyone else that's with us today also, thank you. That concludes the presentation part of today's webinar. We will move on to the Q&A. We have about 30 minutes for Q&A. You can use the chat window to send questions privately to me, Justin Burns, and just let them in. Thanks. All right, I have our first question already. Derek asks, can you provide the cost-benefit analysis worksheet finance utilizes?
Are you thinking about for the project, or are you thinking about for the Agile Lean effort?
I'm watching for the effort.
to the effort, so the cost benefit on the effort itself. I don't think we have a formal cost benefit for that. We could probably put something together, but we don't have anything that is readily available.
Okay, thanks. We have a message from Dan Miller. Says, nice slides. Will they be available on the OCIO site? Dan, yes, they will. We actually have a revamp of the Agile Fridays page coming probably sometime this afternoon. I wasn't quite ready for this Agile Friday, but something I think people will really like. So I will work with Jeanne Marie and get the slides right after this, and we will get them up. Another question coming in. Ruth asks, what type of tools would you use from project status reporting to executive management?
Well, we've found that the book of work makes that very easy. What I do is each of the different teams in my program update their book of work regularly, and the active projects are pulled off of that, scored as being either red, amber, or green in terms of their status, and distributed at the end of each sprint to all of our stakeholders. So one really good outcome of this is that our business said that the transparency around knowing what was happening and what the status was of what was happening has increased dramatically as an outcome of this effort. And we'll be talking more about that at the May 16th case study, which will get more into how we worked with our business partners on this and some of the successes we had.
Great. We're looking forward to that one. Got questions rolling in here pretty steadily, so I'll keep them coming. Vani asks, there appears to be an ideal situation with 2 to 4 weeks per iteration. However, many teams have other conflicting duties. What is the recommendation when you don't have dedicated teams?
What we've found is we've found that we can say, we're going to dedicate the team for, 4 hours a day or 6 hours a day, and then build in time for some of this other stuff. I do think we've run into situations where people have been supposed to be on 2 teams, and I actually think that kind of flies in the face of the whole Agile Lean value of only working on one thing at a time. And so ultimately we try to avoid that, but we have recognized that in any organization you have a certain amount of overhead, and you can either plan those into your sprints, or you can just focus your sprint work during the majority of the day, and then have a couple hours for other activities. Gwen, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of other things. So the team itself may go on, key people may go on vacation or not be around. I have found on the team I was managing that just keeping that cadence consistent regardless of who's there, the team learns the process, and so who's ever there can pick it up and keep the work going, and then as people come in and out on vacations, they can catch up because of all the visibility in the task board. They can see right away what the team is working on. When working with contributed resources, there's a couple ways that can help with that. Maybe they're not committed, dedicated to your team, the core team doing the process. You can ask them to come maybe during your daily stand-up so that they can get informed and updated of what's going on during the sprint, or help with any blocking issues that emerge. Another way of doing that is have them participate for more as a dedicated resource for a 2-week sprint, and then the next 2 weeks maybe they work on another project, but try and maintain and defend that 2-week increment and keep them focused during that period.
Okay. We have a request to go back to the Book of Work slide. Could you pop that one back up for us? Great,
okay.
We'll just leave that in the background as we field more questions here. I have another question. Yvonne asks, please provide more information on how to get the work effort into right-sized chunks.
That's an excellent question, and we continue to iterate on it. We consider a right-sized chunk to be something that we can actually do within the 2-week sprint. So that's been one of our mantras. And what that typically means is that we'll be taking a minimum business increment and breaking it up into features and into stories. But it's possible that a story might need to be chunked a little further, and then that gets into a right-sized story. Our teams have spent more time receiving coaching in how to do that pretty much over everything else. And it's paid off in that we're getting to where we have a very predictable way of measuring our team's velocity. So each team has a good sense of how many story points they can do within a 2-week sprint. And this has been really helpful to us because the university is taking on a major HR payroll replacement project, and we're going to have to do a lot of integration work around it. So it's helping us understand many story points the teams can move through within a 2-week sprint, and what bandwidth is available to them if they still continue to try to do some of the regular work they do in addition to this HR payroll integration work.
Well, and I'll just add, with the right-size story, one way that helps, I think, thinking about it is you can define a right-size story based on the type of work that needs to be accomplished. So you could have a right-size story that's just research for this story, or one that's just testing, or one that's defining a development strategy for it. So translating it back into how the team thinks about the work can help in defining the boundaries of a right-size story.
All right, thank you very much. Next question from Lisa. What kind of documentation was done for these types of projects, noting that usually Agile keeps documentation to a minimum?
So yeah, on the Agile project that I've worked on, that's something, again, that can evolve based on the needs of the team. And I think one of the great things about the Agile process and doing those retrospectives is you try something out and the team reflects, how did that work? Do we need to do more documentation, less documentation? You know, it goes back to, it depends on the level of complexity of what you're building. If you have a heavy UI component or a user interface that needs to be designed, it helps to go through some storyboarding and get some prototypes written out. One tool that the team I worked on really helped is we started doing user story maps. So you're really mapping out the workflow as the user would navigate through the system, and that user story map became a way of documenting a roadmap for what capabilities the team was building, and then could get further broken down for each story. The acceptance criteria then also gets documented, reviewed, business process flows. It's really, I think, dependent on what project you're developing and what is needed to communicate with your owner and get that negotiation and understanding of what you're trying to accomplish.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in on that? All right. We'll move on to the next question. Something a little different here. Daryl asks, what are you most proud of doing in this effort at the UW so far, and what's been the most rewarding thing for you all personally?
So what was the first part? What's been the...
What are you most proud of, and what has been the most rewarding thing in this effort?
Well, the most rewarding thing, I think, has been, well, there's been a number of things, actually. One thing that's come across and was not something I was really focused on to start with is that my teams are much more kind of mix and match now. And we've had several instances where we've had to throw different teams together that typically hadn't worked together to create something, and they had a common language. They were already using the same sprint cycle. They were already using the same sprint ceremonies. It really made them very efficient in terms of very quickly delivering business value across their two systems. And I think I'm seeing that happening more and more across my program. The other thing that has been really powerful is that from the very beginning we involved our business partners in financial management at the University of Washington. We included them in the initial training. We made sure they were clear about what their roles and responsibilities are. And so we've tried to keep the on how this has been working for them, and we did a survey I think about 3 to 4 months into it, and the results were really quite gratifying in pretty much every area that we asked them about. We were, significantly increasing transparency. We were creating a common language that made it easier for them to understand what was going on. They felt like they could see work in process getting reduced. They were getting delivery of software that they needed and wanted faster. So that was really powerful to see the results of that survey. We're going to be sending out another survey shortly to kind of see, because it's kind of a process of continuous improvement, so we're going to be looking to see, what does this next iteration look like. But it was quite gratifying to, even after the initial implementation, get such strong results back.
Yeah, and I could just, from the perspective as a coach, it was fun to be part of an effort that in just maybe a 6-month time period, the teams within the finance program went from doing work and approaching work in very different ways to really working on the same sprint cycle, again, understanding and using the same terminology and being able to collaborate in an easier way. On the team I particularly worked on, it was a little bit of a painful process at the beginning, but being able to, because we had been doing Agile in a different way on our own, and so there is some change required when teams have their own isolated way of doing it and then need to scale across program. But the team that I work with, we overcame that and have now a much more, I guess, established way of doing their process and really see the value of being more coordinated across the program.
All right. Anyone else want to chime in?
Hi, this is Maureen. And my focus is more on the holistic side, the cross program. So there are 5 different groups and trying to, as Gwen said, get some commonalities. And the other part of my focus was on the culture and the individuals and making sure people weren't feeling this was done to them, that they were part of the process. So the book of work is a really good example of something that gives us that more holistic view. We've never had that before. It's been very siloed before, and I think we've done an outstanding job at making that not be a barrier. What team you're on is no longer, creating walls. One thing about the book of work is that you can see what the highest priorities are on each group, and it actually works. So the way we came up with the criteria and how we weigh them, and I give immense credit to Alan Chetalawada on that, it actually works when people try it, and there was a lot of resistance to it, but it shows that, no, you're working on something that is not as high a priority as this other thing. Even though you know how to do it and it's easy to do, it's not the thing you need to be working on right now. So that's helped a lot with having the consistent business value criteria. On the cultural side, getting individual buy-in was an interesting thing to approach, and one way we did that was to have people show off their work. So we had these Gemba walks where we had managers, we had our business owners, we had individuals on each team go around and hear from frontline people what their boards were about and what they've accomplished through this process. And I think that was very powerful. Well, I know it was. I know it was very empowering, and it really created more ownership on the local level. And I'm going to turn it over to Alan for what he's most proud of.
Well, I think what I'm most proud of is to see the change and the organization involving the business and implementing of the practices, in a fairly short time frame. We're ready for round 2.
We're ready for content maturity.
All right. Thanks. That was great, everybody. Thank you very much. Next question we've got in the queue here is from Ruth. She asks, do you see any way to apply lean agile concepts to COTS or software packages other than in-house development?
We actually have been doing that. We have a mix of in-house development and vendor products that we support, and all teams, regardless of what product they were supporting, participated in this. And so we found that it works great. It is pretty generic in terms of a methodology that can apply to COTS or homegrown systems.
All right. Another one here, I thought this might have been a duplicate, but on reading it, I think it's definitely a different question here. When following the Agile process, how do you mitigate for competing resources? For example, if you have one test team but several development teams, and everybody wants the test team's time.
Well, I think this goes back to how you put the teams together. A successful team has all of the skill sets needed to realize the value. So testers in our situation are part of the team. So they're assigned out to the different teams. Although here at the university, we do run into shared resources such as infrastructure groups and DBAs that we need to manage time with. And it can be all about including them in your planned work process. So you're able to predict, I'm going to need a DBA to help with this analysis in sprint 3. So you can tell them, when you're on sprint 0 that I think I'm going to need your help on sprint 3. So part of that, understanding your velocity and estimating the work in a predictable way helps you communicate those tent poles and get them addressed soon.
Okay. Let's see, we are running low on the question queue, so if anyone has questions, feel free to chime in here. I actually had a question brewing that I wanted to ask. What do you feel is the really defining the relationship of Lean to Agile? Is Lean a higher level process that's happening at that business value decision level, and Agile is more operational, or how do you view that relationship?
I think Lean is really focusing on the efficiency and effectiveness of the business process, and Agile is really focusing on using Lean principles to efficiently and effectively automate the business process. And I think that when you pull them together, you have something that's pretty powerful, because you want to automate a process. You don't necessarily want to pave the cow path. You want to look at the process holistically, see how the value stream can be made to be more efficient, eliminate waste, and use the capabilities of the software product in the best and highest value way. And I think that, we've all probably seen different flavors of software that's been not necessarily streamlining a process or implemented in a way where there has to be a lot of workarounds. So I feel like the two really go hand in hand, and I feel like there's continued exploration and interest in our organization to see how we can really marry those two in a very logical way so that people can really understand the connection.
All right. Thank you very much. We got another question. How do you address maintenance and operations once the project is completed? Do you use a different team to work on it and have the Agile team continue to develop new software, or do you use the same team?
So I can speak to that. So the teams here in the finance program are a mix. So some of them are just primarily focused on maintenance activities, and others have projects that they're working on. So this Agile process really works in either situation. It can be, I think what we have found that the teams focused on the support type work has the work that's already broken down for them. The support requests are smaller in size already, and so can be easier managed through the process. And that the project work, has to go more through that deliberative process of breaking it down and making sure that there's alignment. So I think it works in both ways. There's just different considerations based on the nature of the work that you're doing.
Okay. Another question here from Heather. Do you use business analysts within your Agile teams during the sprints? And if so, what is their role? Or are they used more to develop the inputs to the sprints, as you spoke of in the beginning of the presentation?
Yeah, so again, back on the project that I worked on, the business analysts can do different hats. So business analyst becomes a skill that anyone can do, but we do have that role. What we have found is that while everyone's working together in the same sprint, business analysts may be working on defining things that the developers are going to work on in 2 sprints from now. So they're doing the work in a cadence type way, but they may be mocking out screen designs or defining that acceptance criteria for things that the developers are going to see in a couple sprints down. Our team also does acceptance test-driven development, so we define tests. And so we have testers that come in and do a testing design before the development starts, so as a way to get the team agreed on what is going to be developed. So there's definitely those skill sets and those roles, and it's all part of the process, and that you can have different kinds of work being committed to and worked on in the sprint.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on that? All right, we got about 10 minutes left. We're out of questions in the queue right now, so if you have one, chime in. If not, we can call it to a close early. We'll give people just a couple minutes here and see if anybody has any questions. Let's see, just going back over my list here, did I already ask you what type of tools you use for project status reporting?
Yeah, I think that was
executive management.
Book of work is kind of the basis, and then we had a template that we pull it into.
And we also have
okay.
We also do have a kind of a war room board that has every team on it, and they report. We have a biweekly scrum of scrums with all of our teams where they report on their velocity, they report on what they've been doing, and then identify blocking issues or intersections.
Okay, can you talk a little bit more about the Scrum of Scrums concept?
Yeah, it is an opportunity for the entire team to come together and see what each other is doing, and also talk about things that are cutting across the entire program. And it's held similar to a daily stand-up. It typically takes about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what topics come up. And we basically do a review of all of the work that people have been doing, and then also what's coming up.
And do you have everyone from every team there, just a representative, or do you have multiple people that are kind of speaking as one for that team?
We have everyone from every team there. Each team usually has one spokesperson. The others chime in as needed. So everybody on the program hears the same thing.
All right. Well, the question queue is looking like it is cleared out here. We've got about 8 minutes left if anyone wants to sneak a question in.
We are going to have another webinar on May 16th.
And that
That's true, yes.
That particular webinar is focused in more on how we actually did do this within the finance program, how we actually engaged our business partners and initiated the implementation of this really completely new methodology and approach for people to take on.
Well, great. Well, I hope we didn't steal your thunder by asking for your best moments from that.
Oh no, we're happy to talk about it more than once. Not a problem.
Awesome. Yep. Okay, I have a follow-up question here from Heather on the BA question. Would the business analyst then be assisting the product owner, or do many business analysts become the product owners?
So I think some of this, what? Assisting, yeah, right. So the idea is the product owner is defining the work and setting the priorities. Again, this goes back to the skill sets of the people, the individuals filling these roles, and what tasks and they're actually accomplishing and based on their workloads. But we do want the product owners to be driving the work. There are other roles that need to be filled on the team, the Scrum Master role, managing and grooming the product backlog. Those are things you want your product owner to have their hands on as much as you can.
So the business analyst does assist the product owner in doing those things, but we have really made a big effort to get our product owners highly engaged. And so having that assistance, I think, helps. But over time, they've become a lot more comfortable with how it's supposed to work.
Okay, but in your view, their role is fundamentally outside of the development, the Scrum team, and they're working on creating new requirements that are going to be integrated into future sprints?
The business analyst can be the Scrum Master in many instances.
Yeah, this is Alex. One of the things, so when the business requirement, which we want the product owner to represent, why it's valuable, how they know they got it, what order they want it to be worked on, how it can be evolved from a decomposition standpoint, is prioritizing that user story as an example, or that chunk. The business analyst, there's detailed business requirements. What are the calculations? What are the processes? What is the look and feel, the screens? There's still detailed requirements that have to be defined for the team to produce it. And I find that business analysts help readily in that role, so they understand what the value proposition is, and then they go in and bridge that gap or further decompose it into what are the detailed business requirements so that the team can then look at the system requirements to achieve it. So they are pretty integral as part of the team, and they are usually working busily, story by story throughout the sprint.
Right, but that grooming and breakdown that Alan is talking about, that becomes work that the whole team is committing to, and the business analyst may work in cooperation with a technical lead or architect to help get that information clarified.
The arrow.
Okay.
Can we look at the arrow? I want to go back to the diagram that Jeanne showed early on. Yeah, the lean agile one. So, can you talk, Gwen or Alan, about where the business owner is in this sequence?
So the product owner is working with either the business sponsor or on what I call the left side, prior to iteration 0. And that is getting the business proposition defined, prioritized, broken into increments, sequenced, and clarifying the acceptance criteria. When we pull it into the delivery side, which is from iteration 0 on, it still needs to be further refined and further clarified and further defined. And so I see the business analyst working more on the right side, and I see the product owner working more on the left side.
Okay.
That's why the product owner is not also involved on the right side.
All right. And now that you've changed slides, we actually have a question about the book of work again. And I was curious about this also, but Mike asks, how do you compute the business value column on the book of work?
How do you do what?
How do you compute business value?
Are we covering that on the 16th?
Yeah.
There's criteria that was established. There was weighting and ranking that was agreed upon across the business stakeholders and the business owners. And then we formulated based on that criteria.
And we have a series of definitions of what high, medium, low means, and we tried it. We did a lot of trial and error with different groups, and we refined it over time so that we're in a space where it's very robust and consistent.
So what I heard is if you want to find out all the details, folks, you're going to have to tune back in on May 16th for their Lean Agile Transition case study. So we are running real low on time here. We've got 2 minutes left. I have one last question in the queue, although I think you might have addressed this with the previous question. The defining of detailed requirements, are they generally defined prior to the sprint, any of the sprints starting, or are they defined during as the sprints continue?
Ideally during the sprint.
So it's a constant sort of a pull-based process in and of itself of creating and producing these new requirements.
Is just in time as practical. Now, some requirements you have to go into detail prior to committing, or you can evolve them as part of the work inside of the sprint. If there's a dependency, somebody asked a question about third-party vendors. That might be a case where you have to go into that a sprint ahead, or you have to front-load that part. But generally, the intent is to do that detail requirement as part of the sprint activity when you pull the story and go active.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're out of time. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions. Thank you, everyone from the University of Washington for joining us today. Next week, we're going to have Adam Light from SOTEC Advisors joining us to talk about Agile, Lean, and project management. And as you heard, we'll also have Jeanne Marie and the team coming back on May 16th to talk about the Agile Transition case study. You can find out more about what's coming up and view previously recorded webinars as well as the slides from the webinars at ocio.wa.gov/agile-fridays. Big thanks once again to Jeanne Marie and everyone from the University of Washington and also Results Washington for helping to make Agile Fridays a success. Thank you everyone for joining us and have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.